I think of the Libertarian movement, given how much progress Governor Gary Johnson has had. So Gary was born in North Dakota. His parents moved him down to New Mexico when he was very young. He actually worked his way through college, when you could actually work your way through college without doing something blatantly illegal. And he actually walked door to door and was a salesman, and he grew his business actually as a handyman, selling his craft, doing something physical, real. He built up what became one of the largest construction companies in all of New Mexico. So unlike the vast majority of politicians that we have out there that are career politicians, that are lawyers, that might be service people, but they don't ultimately understand entrepreneurship and creation of value. And it's ultimately why I think that we have so many people that are politicians that want to try to fix things by implementing these regulations and these hurdles, not understanding core tenets that you can't rob from Peter to pay Paul. And the idea of creating value and price, these things are only phenomena that can occur in the private market. So Gary Johnson went on to decide to enter politics after seeing all this frustration. And he ran for the first time. It was the first time ever running, I think, for any political office, I believe, in 1994, and won. He beat the incumbent, and then he ran again 4 years later. Now, what's really interesting about, I think, Governor Johnson's first 4 years in office, especially, or a few years, is he vetoed everything. I mean, he was known as the proverbial Mr. No, and there was I read a statistic that he vetoed more bills as a governor than the other 49 governors combined. So just to put it in perspective, and what's amazing about this is instead of the usual politicians pandering to an audience of a union, let's say, or some special groups, no, that wasn't Governor Johnson's approach at all. It was to say, no, if I'm just not going to take more government. I'm not going to take, as my constituents are telling me, they don't want more government. They want less government. They want as least government as possible. They understand that. So, that I think that really spoke droves about Governor Gary Johnson. He went on to go ahead and run for president. Withdrew quickly once he was able to fully appreciate the Republican machine, I think, at the presidential level, and decided instead to go full on into the Libertarian Party and run for president there. So, and I believe that we are going to be fortunate enough to see another presidential run here. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce, hopefully be the next president of the United States. I think he will be, Governor Gary Johnson.
If I may tell you some things that's happening in my life, I have a wonderful family, really. I have 2 kids, Saya and Eric. Eric and his wife just gave birth to my first grandchild about 3 months ago. And I am in love. I'm in love with Kate Prusak. We've been together now for about 8 years. She's my best friend, girlfriend, my fiance now for 7.5 years. I think we're going to get married someday. Like I say, we're in love, and it's terrific. And she's all about health, and she's all about wellness, and she's an athlete, same as myself. We were in a bike race a couple of weeks ago. 400 people. Kate, at 63 years old, was the second woman across the line for 100 miles. And Moi was like 14th, which no one older than me finished ahead of me. So anyway, life is really good. And I do want you to know, and maybe you know this, but I am an athlete. I've been an athlete my entire life. And it's a bit of an oxymoron to say that you're a competitive athlete at 62, but I really M in that category, and health and wellness is really, really important. I've had a goal my entire life of climbing the highest mountain on all of the 7 continents, and in December I actually got to the top of Vincent in Antarctica, which was the 7th of the 7, which was really cool. And I have been an entrepreneur my entire life. That's my life. And one bit of advice that I'm going to give all of you tonight, and it's worth exactly what you're paying for it, which is nothing. But the advice is that take whatever it is that you know, whatever it is that you do, and apply it entrepreneurially.
Yes.
The rewards are 100-fold. There's so much talk given about going out and getting a good job. The notion that you, every one of you, can create jobs and create your own job, that's what I think the liberty movement is really all about. Right now, I am the CEO of a publicly traded company in the marijuana space. And it's really about making the world a better place. The notion that marijuana products on the medical side arguably are more effective than legal prescription drugs and don't kill anybody. And then on the recreational side, I have always maintained that legalizing marijuana will lead to less overall substance abuse because people will find it as such a safer alternative than other substances, starting with alcohol. So, it's amazing too that right now we have some entrepreneurial models worldwide that are just terribly, terribly exciting. Uber, Lyft, where the middleman is taken out, and that's the model for the future, and that's what we should all be supporting. Airbnb, that you can. Amazon taking out the middleman, Alibaba taking out the middleman. I mean, this is the future, and it's terribly exciting, really exciting. It's exciting for all of us. As an entrepreneur, I've learned a couple of things being an entrepreneur, being a successful entrepreneur. And it starts with sharing in the profits. It's just amazing when you share in the profits how everybody pulls the load with the same vigor and enthusiasm, and cutting in people in the profit, into the profit, sharing in the profits. I mean, everybody has this notion of, gee, I can't give up my piece of the pie. I can't give up the profits that are coming to me. Well, what needs to be recognized is the pie goes from here to here. And yeah, you're taking a smaller piece of the pie, but the pie is so much bigger. So sharing in the profits is just really, really key to success as an entrepreneur. Another thing that's really key to success as an entrepreneur is the ability to hire and fire. And I will tell you that that hiring is really, really easy. You vet people, you talk with people, you always hire the best people, and it always works out. No, it doesn't work out. So the easiest thing in the world is to hire people. The hardest thing in the world is to fire people. There is nothing harder than firing people. But if you don't fire people, you end up bankrupt because the dollars go out the back door. And you've got to learn how to fire. Nothing's more difficult, but you have to be able to do it. In 2012, Mitt Romney said, "I love firing people." Whoa! I probably fired more people than Mitt Romney, but I hated every bit of it. And it wasn't necessarily the person, it may have been me, but for whatever reason it didn't work out. but you've got to do it. So that really is the difference between the public and the private sector, is the hiring and firing. We elect a whole lot of people who have never hired and fired. And when we elect someone who has never hired and fired, what do they find? They find that hiring is really, really easy. It's really easy to do. And firing, because it's so difficult, and because you're in the public sector, and the money going out the back door isn't yours, it is yours, but it's not really yours, nobody gets fired. And I don't want to pick on President Obama, all right, because it's just a continuation, it's what exists when it comes to politicians, is President Obama never hired, never fired, found it really easy to hire people, hasn't fired a single soul, and I realize there are exceptions to that, but he hired a whole lot of people who have never hired and fired. And so do you see how dysfunctional bureaucracy ends up being because of that phenomenon? So I got elected governor of New Mexico. I had never been involved in politics prior to running for governor of New Mexico. I'm much like Donald Trump right now, making the pitch that, hey, I'm a business person, I'm going to make a difference. What I promised in New Mexico is, hey, I'm a business person, I'm going to bring a common sense business approach to state government. Best product, best service, lowest price, it's going to all be about common sense. What the Republican Party said to me when I approached them 2 weeks before I announced my candidacy, what the Republican Party said is, wow, Gary, really like you, really like what you've got to say, really appreciate your business success, but you just need to know that you will never get elected. It is not possible to come from completely outside of politics and get elected governor in a state that's 2-to-1 Democrat. It's not going to happen. So how did it happen? Well, I paid for my own campaign. So the money part I covered myself. Nothing was for sale because I paid for it myself. Now I virtually paid for my entire primary, but then when I won the primary, really it was just going to the mailbox and picking up checks. That's the way it worked. There was no quid pro quo. But we got approached by people who said, hey, $50,000 and here's what we want. And the response was always, look, find somebody else. That's not the deal here. I had people call me that gave me significant amounts of money. I remember one individual gave me $30,000 and he calls me up and he said, you vetoed my bill. And I said, I was wondering who had that bill. That bill is highway robbery. And by the way, we never talked about any sort of, you're going to give me money and I'm going to sign your bill. And he said, and he rails on, and I said, and I got to use this line a number of times, look, if you'd like a refund, just let me know and we'll send you the money. And nobody ended up asking for a refund. Nobody. But I vetoed Mom and apple pie when I was governor. I love Mom and I love apple pie, but gee, the price tag on that is just a little bit too much. I think I'll veto it, and I always issued a veto message. I may have vetoed more bills than the other 49 governors in the country combined. I vetoed 750 bills while I was governor of New Mexico. And it really made a difference. Half of them were spending measures. My favorite bill that I vetoed was a Republican bill. And by the way, in New Mexico, the legislature was 2-to-1, Democrat versus Republican. But my first year in office, they sent me 400 bills for my signature, and I vetoed 200 of them. I vetoed half of their product. But contained in that first year was a dog and cat exercise bill. That pet stores were going to be required to exercise their dogs and cats 2 hours a day, 3 times a week. And I got to tell you, this is a great business practice. It's where I would want to buy my dogs and cats. You can see it across the marquee. You know, we exercise our dogs and cats 2 hours a day, 3 times a week. That's where I want to buy my dogs and cats. But in my veto message, look, great business practice. It's something that the pet stores should be doing. But if I sign this legislation, at some point, I'm going to have to fund the dog and cat exercise police. And that's the way it always comes down to. And if it evolves like our police departments have evolved, you know, they're going to be in armored vehicles to enter into the pet stores and take care of the issues surrounding non-compliance. I was more outspoken than any governor in the country regarding school choice. I really believe that we need to bring competition to public education. I really believe that the model of the future is free. It's the Khan Academy, and I'm sure that most of you are familiar with that, K-A-H-N. You can get a doctoral degree. You can get a kindergarten through doctoral degree in any subject that you want, and it's free. That's the model of the future. It absolutely is. Why we're stuck in this brick and mortar mode is because we continue to spend more and more and more money on education with less and less and less results. I was very outspoken as governor of New Mexico, and by the way, what I'm about to tell you, nobody else has done since 1999. I took a really hard look at the war on drugs, and I came out in favor of legalizing marijuana and adopting harm reduction strategies regarding all the other drugs, the things that we really care about. I think that 90% of the drug problem is prohibition related, not use related. That is not to discount the problems with use and abuse, but that should be the focus. At the end of my talk here, I'm going to open it up to comments, questions, and because of this one, I'll probably get some insults, but I would love to talk about it. That is, I privatized half the prisons in the state of New Mexico. And by doing that, I solved a problem that was maybe one of the biggest problems in New Mexico. And on an apples-to-apples, oranges-to-oranges basis, the private prisons offered the same goods and services for 2/3 the cost of the public prisons. Now, I think this is good government. I think it's good government when you can actually do that. And back to the insults, questions, and answers. I'd love somebody to follow up on this, and we can talk a little bit more about it. As governor of New Mexico, 4-lane, 500 miles of 4-lane highway really made a difference from an infrastructure standpoint and didn't raise taxes to do it. As a matter of fact, as governor of New Mexico, not one penny of tax was increased over an 8-year period. That had never happened before and hasn't happened since in the state. Changed Medicaid while I was governor from a fee-for-service model to a managed care model. What does that gibberish mean? That means that as governor of New Mexico, I had an insurance policy as governor of New Mexico. And we did the math. Gee, there are how many Medicaid recipients in the state of New Mexico times my insurance policy as governor of New Mexico? Would we really save 25% if we gave everybody that's receiving Medicaid my insurance policy as governor of New Mexico? Yes, that's exactly what we did. And if that isn't good government, I don't know, good government, it's an improvement on government. I don't know if there is good government. When I left office, there were 1,200 fewer state employees when I left office than when I took office. Now, this was a promise that we didn't fire anybody. When I say we didn't fire anybody, yes, we cut out dead wood, but it was not about layoffs. It wasn't about layoffs. It was about just managing attrition, and really a testament to state government employees that they would do more with less employees. Unquestionably, that's a more efficient state government. So it was something that I promised I would do and actually did it, and that has never happened before. in the state of New Mexico, where there were fewer state employees from one year to the next, much less over an 8-year period. I think I would be president of the United States today if people just heard what I have to say and did say. And I have 3 things that I would like to point toward that prove what I just said. One was Rick Perry was beating his chest over the fact that he created more jobs in Texas than anybody, any other candidate running for president. Well, somebody in the media got a hold of that, and they actually went out and did some serious analysis, and lo and behold, that title belongs to Gary Johnson. And I was asked about it, as I was when I was governor of New Mexico. Wow, you created more jobs than anyone else in office. And my response was, I didn't create one single job in New Mexico. The government does not create jobs, the private sector does. I think I may have contributed to a more level playing field, but that was my response. Secondly, the ACLU, a group dedicated to civil liberties, a group of attorneys nationwide dedicated to the U.S. Constitution, they came out with a report card on all the presidential candidates. 24 Liberty torches was a perfect score. Let's see, Mitt Romney, Rick Santorum, and Newt Gingrich, between the 3 of them, had 1 Liberty torch. Skipping everybody else, in 3rd place was Barack Obama with 16 out of 24. In 2nd place was Ron Paul with 18 out of 24. And in 1st place was moi with 21 out of 24. Which, by the way, wasn't about what the candidates were saying, it was actually about their track records and what they had done. So, something that I'm really proud of. The last thing is that I don't know how many of you got on the website last election, and it's actually up this election too. I'm not on it this year because I'm not an announced candidate, and I would like you all to know that I hope to be the Libertarian nominee, but that remain, or hope to run, hope to be able to have a chance at becoming the Libertarian nominee. But in 2012, on the website isidewith.com, 3.5 million people got online, answered about 3 dozen questions, and then at the end of the questions got paired up with the presidential candidate most in line with their views. I was the next president of the United States based on reflecting what most Americans think. Now, you could be a homeless person and reflect on what most Americans think. Does that qualify you to be president of the United States? I don't think so. And you can judge whether or not I am or would be qualified to be president of the United States. So what are those issues? I mean, what are the issues that tie with most Americans? Well, I think the biggest issue facing this country today is the deficit. I think that unless we balance the federal budget, we're going to find ourselves in the midst of a monetary collapse, and that's not going to be a good thing. And the only way, and it doesn't guarantee that we survive continuing to spend more money than what we take in, the only way we have a chance is to actually balance the federal budget. So I propose balancing the federal budget. I think that when it comes to the economy, I think that we should abolish income tax. I think that we should abolish corporate tax. And that we should eliminate the IRS. Now, I get into trouble with a group like you all for what I'm about to say next, and that is, I'm the guy, I was the guy, who could have said and replaced it with nothing and made it stick. I really believe that I could make it stick, replacing it with nothing. But as President of the United States, you're not being elected the dictator. You don't have a magic wand. You've got to deal within the process. So I don't think Congress is going to buy off on eliminating income tax, corporate tax, abolishing the IRS. So I think that the Congress could replace all of this with one federal consumption tax. I use the fair tax as an example of a starting point on how you dot the I's and cross the T's to make that happen. If you've got this much bureaucracy within the IRS, you're talking about this much bureaucracy when it comes to collecting a national consumption tax, because the states would end up doing that. But I think as a result of that, I think with no income tax and no corporate tax, that we create tens of millions of jobs in this country, because why would any corporation, why would any business locate anywhere other than the United States with zero corporate tax? And so I see that as the way to create tens of millions of jobs. To balance the federal budget, you're talking about taking on the entitlements. You can't balance the federal budget if you don't talk about Medicaid and Medicare and military spending. You can't balance the budget if you don't talk about those issues. And nobody is talking about those issues. Nobody was talking about them in 2012. Nobody's talking about them right now. And yet that has to be the case. Social Security, if you take the model of the fair tax, consumption tax, nothing would be taken out of your paycheck, and Social Security would come out of the proceeds of the one federal consumption tax. Military, look, we need to cut military spending by 20%. And I use 20%. We need to cut government today 20% to balance the federal budget, and that does mean the military. And the military, look, we need to stop with our military interventions.
Woo!
We can't continue to lob bombs. We can't continue these drone strikes. We're making a situation that exists and did exist, we're making that situation worse. We need to understand there is an absolute terrorist threat out there. It exists. It is radical Islam. It's there. It's real. And so what we need to do, and what we've gotten confused over, and I lead the pack when it comes to being confused about the following. We need to differentiate between freedom of religion, which we all stand for. We absolutely guarantee freedom of religion. We need to separate that from politics. So in no way am I Islamophobic, but I am Sharia-phobic.
Yes!
And that is the fact that Sharia law is not acceptable in the United States. The law that's acceptable in the United States is the United States Constitution. Freedom of religion absolutely exists, and we all support freedom of religion.
Right. Thank you. Right. Nobody's talking about it.
Nobody's talking about
Yeah.
immigration. Look, let's start with the notion that immigration is really a good thing. Okay, we're a nation of immigrants. So let's make it as easy as possible for somebody that wants to come into this country and work to get a work visa. I'm not talking about a green card, I'm not talking about citizenship, I'm talking about a work visa that would entail a background check and a social security card, that applicable taxes would get paid. If we didn't have income tax, corporate tax, if we had a national consumption tax, nobody avoids that. Nobody. Illegal, legal, visitor to the United States, U.S. citizen, nobody's going to avoid that tax. You take away all that bureaucracy. And if we adopt no income tax, no corporate tax, no IRS, we will need 10 million immigrants to fill the jobs that will be created in the United States just because of that. Building a fence across the border is the nuttiest idea that I have ever heard, and I am talking about being a border governor. Let me quote someone here and see if you can guess who I'm trying to emulate. Let's build a really big fence across the border. How big? Huge, gigantic. How tall will it be? Really, really tall. If they build that thing 60 foot tall, and we are talking about 3,000 miles, it'll be the most elaborate tunnel system that's ever existed underneath that wall. That's the entrepreneurs that exist on both sides of the border that will take advantage of that. We do need to legalize marijuana. It's happening. Here's my prediction on marijuana. My prediction on marijuana is right now you've got 24 states where it's legal medicinally, you have 4 states where it's legal recreationally, and you have the District of Columbia. Virtually all of those states, with the exception of a couple, happened at the ballot box. People voted to make that happen. I'm going to predict that in 2016, at the ballot box, California votes to legalize marijuana recreationally, and I see that as the absolute tipping point. I'm going to predict that overnight, 20 state legislatures embrace the notion of legalizing marijuana. The legislatures pass the bill, send it on to the governor for pass or veto, and that really is the tipping point. And have you ever thought about the fact that up until recently, up until the last several years, marijuana has been an issue where the minority wanted to legalize marijuana. But as of a couple of years ago, the majority now of citizens in this country want to legalize marijuana. Well, what is the U.S. Constitution about? What is it being a U.S. citizen all about? Well, it's the U.S. it's the Bill of Rights that protects the minority against the majority. That's what it's about. But what we've got right now is a situation where the minority says to the majority, not only should marijuana not be legal, but you should go to prison for marijuana. And that still exists, and that's tyranny. And that's what exists right now still in this country. Is there an issue out there more difficult than abortion? I really can't say, because I'm not a woman and I don't want to have a say in that decision whatsoever. That is a decision that belongs solely in the woman's hands who is in that situation. Free markets. I really believe in free markets. I talked earlier about school choice. How that can absolutely transform education in this country. I mean, it would be terribly exciting. Healthcare. Look, I reject the insurance model when it comes to healthcare. We would have insurance, when it comes to healthcare, all of us would have insurance to cover ourselves for catastrophic injury and illness, and then we would pay as you go in a system of healthcare where it was genuinely competitive.
Right.
When the whole debate started about healthcare and reforming healthcare, I envisioned gallbladders are us.
Right.
Hospitals that would specialize in gallbladder surgery and would make that happen for thousands of dollars as opposed to tens of thousands of dollars. And you can kind of go down the list. Very affordable. I just read the other day that the average healthcare cost for a family of 4 is $16,000. Envision for a second a healthcare system where you would cover yourself for catastrophic injury and illness for that family of 4. I'm going to guess maybe that would be $3,000. And that you would operate in a free market economy for healthcare, something that doesn't exist, but that you would end up paying $20 for the x-ray instead of $200 for the x-ray because you're going to go to X-Rays R Us.
Right.
And then radiologists to look at it, instead of paying $1,500, you'd pay $125 that radiologists are us, and end up maybe spending another couple $1,000s out of pocket, and you can see the savings. That would be a free market approach to healthcare. The government could get involved in this and blow the lid off the supply when it comes to doctors. Okay, so those are the issues, and there are other issues, and like I said, I'd love to perhaps talk about those. But how does a libertarian potentially win the presidential election? Right now, Our America Initiative, which is my political arm, we are suing the Presidential Debate Commission. 80% of Americans want another choice when it comes to the election, but they have no idea why there's not another choice. Well, at the heart of this is the Presidential Debate Commission. We are suing on the grounds of antitrust legislation, the Sherman Act, that they are monopolies and they collude with one another to eliminate any competition to what they do. In 1988, the League of Women Voters has always sponsored the presidential debates. But in 1988, they wrote a letter, a very terse letter, that said, we cannot be part of a fraud being perpetuated on the American public, which is the debates between Republicans and Democrats where they work to exclude everyone else. We may not win this lawsuit, but we are going to win this lawsuit because I got to tell you, we filed this lawsuit on September 29th, and what you're going to see out of this lawsuit is you're going to see a discovery phase. And I hope it becomes nationally entertaining. Did you see what the Republicans signed? Did you see what the Democrats signed? Did you see what the media signed when it came to the presidential debates, and that everyone else other than a Republican and a Democrat would get excluded? And right now, of course, they're moving to dismiss our lawsuit. Well, our lawsuit is being headed up by Bruce Fein, whose claim to fame is that he brought down Nixon in Watergate. And so they're not going to dismiss this as trivial. Bruce Fein was also deputy counsel to Reagan, and Bruce Fein is saying that this is the biggest thing that he has ever done in his life, and this has the chance of changing politics in America. And the breakoff point would be if you are on the ballot in enough states to mathematically be elected President of the United States, 270 electoral votes, that you should be included in the presidential debate. Well, in 2012, that would have been the Libertarian Party, and that would have been the Green Party, and I'm glad that we included the Green Party in this because this is about anyone. And this isn't about me, this is about the Libertarian nominee, whoever that is, potentially being able to get in the national debates, and that is the only way that a Libertarian is going to end up having a chance to win at this. And are you going to win? Are you going to win? Are you going to win this lawsuit? Well, you're sure not going to win the lawsuit if you don't file it. And a lot of resources went into it, and there are probably many in this room that have contributed to this. Thank you very much. But it is going forward, and it will make a difference. The Presidential Debate Commission says that you have to be at 2012 said you had to be at 15% in the polls to be in the presidential debates. How many polls did you see with Mitt Romney, Barack Obama, Gary Johnson, and Jill Stein on that list? Not one. That's what I'm going to dare say. And by the way, just being in the polls is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're in all the polls because you can mathematically be elected, gosh, I've seen that name so many times that I better check it out. I mean, there's somebody else that could actually be president. So what are they all about? I think it will and can make a difference and potentially elect a libertarian as president. So I'm going to close here with Johnson's 7 principles of good government. One is become reality driven. You got to find out what's what, and you got to base your decisions and actions on that. Sounds like the way we live our lives. Always be honest and tell the truth. It's extremely difficult to do any harm to anybody who tells the regardless of the consequences. Always do what's right and fair.
Right.
You got to remember that the louder your critics become, you got to understand what you stand for, and you got to stand by that. And you shouldn't be immune to criticism. The criticism may actually contain false information that you've been given out. But do what's right and fair. Number 4, determine your goal, develop a plan to reach that goal, and then act. Don't procrastinate. Number 5, make sure everybody who ought to know what you're doing knows what you're doing. Communicate. Number 6, don't hesitate to deliver bad news. There's always time to fix things, and how many times do we see the initial infraction followed by stuff that gets worse? Just fess up, acknowledge mistakes, and move on. And then lastly, and it kind of goes to what I started off by talking about, if you don't have a job that you love enough to do what it takes to do that job, then quit and get a different job tomorrow, and maybe not a different job, but entrepreneurially go out there and make it happen. So thank you very much, and like I say, I think we're going to have a microphone right here for questions, answers, and insults. Have at it. There's the...
We don't see a role for government. I'd like your opinion on the role for government for things specifically regarding antitrust. The Misesian view, my best understanding of it is, monopolies are only created by the government. To the extent that there's not a government forcing competition not to enter the market, there's no such thing as monopoly. So specifically, what's your view on the Sherman Antitrust Act, and don't you feel that that act itself is an overreach of government?
Well,
the one you're relying on for your lawsuit.
So in a perfect world, what you're saying is really accurate. But this is something that I found as governor of New Mexico, is that you should absolutely be open to potentially making things better. So there was no legislation that was ever discounted, by me anyway, that might not actually make the situation better. So in this case, this is an absolute monopoly, and this is a way to actually cure that monopoly, cure this injustice.
It's a monopoly in the necessity sense in that you're not allowed to open up your own private competing debate company and have debates. They're not letting you. In the same way, if I live in a certain town and Cablevision is given a monopoly.
No, it sounds great. Believe me, it sounds great. But you know what? I did the whole third-party debate thing, and a lot of people tuned in. Maybe everybody in this room tuned in, but America didn't tune in. America tunes in to the presidential debates when it comes to the Democrat and the Republican.
I agree America tunes into the debates when it's Republican Democrats. I don't agree that gives you a right to force your way in through the Sherman Antitrust Act, which is backed by laws.
I wouldn't say force your way in. I would say that...
You wouldn't say that, but that's what you're doing.
No, I get it. So here's the point also, okay? We would all like to go from A to Z. And you'd like to have that Z articulated because that's where you want to go. But if you go from A to D, does that make things better? I think so. You want to stay put at A because you're going to demand the Z type place? That's not going to happen.
So, to sum that up in one phrase, the ends justify the means?
Look, I appreciate what you got to say. I really do. I really do. It's a place I want to live.
Hi, Gary Johnson. Before I get to my question, I just want you to know that if you get the nomination for the Libertarian candidate, which I wish you luck to get it, every other candidate, whether it be Hillary, Jeb Bush, or Cruz, they will have one candidate to beat.
Obama 2016.
Question is, you mentioned want to balance the budget. Very good. But you didn't mention the 18.5 trillion ton gorilla in the room. I'm talking about the debt.
No, I did. I did.
Anyway,
Okay, sorry.
Consider this.
Nobody listens.
Let's say Congress said, we're going to put $1 aside in a special fund for every second, 24/7, to pay down his debt. $1. So it turns out that they're going to get $1 billion, 32,000 years. That's so good, they said. Okay, we're good. $1,000. So after 32 years, they're going to get $1 trillion. Much better progress. To pay down 18.5 trillion takes 592 years. Oops! My point is, there's no way we're going to pay this debt back. Would you consider repudiating the debt? Just repudiate it.
No, I don't think you can repudiate the debt because it's everybody in this room that's holding that debt in one form or another. And what I'm talking about is balancing the federal budget. I'm talking about a 20% reduction in federal spending, something that has never happened before. But based on my experience having been governor of New Mexico, if you've got somebody in there that's going to absolutely pound their fist over making this happen, it will happen. Okay, let's try and get everybody moving in this. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, Governor. My name is Bill Schmidt from Peekskill, New York. You gave a great speech, and I think you're a superb candidate. I want to ask you...
And I'm not a candidate. It's something I hope to be, but I'm not.
You're a great potential candidate. How's that?
All right, thanks.
I want to ask you, and you've touched on it a bit, but I'd like you to expand a bit more. With respect to our welfare warfare state that we currently have, what specific areas would you target for elimination? What specific areas would you target for reduction? And what, if any, areas of the welfare warfare state would you leave in place?
Well, and I was governor of New Mexico for 8 years. So what I would propose is that everybody takes a haircut for 20%. Now, is that the way to go about it from a business standpoint? Absolutely not. When you go about it from a business standpoint, you actually cut things, you eliminate things completely that aren't working, and you may actually increase funding in areas where it does work. But when you talk about the entitlements, Medicaid and Medicare, I really believe that both of those need to devolve to the states with 20% less funding and let the states make that happen. 50 laboratories of best practice. And based on having been governor of New Mexico, I believe I could have delivered Medicaid services in New Mexico to those truly in need. And I'm in the camp that I believe that there are those, I've seen those, that are truly in need. And I want to help them. And I think that but for government, perhaps they don't get the help that they can, but we have gone way over the line when it comes to those truly in need. Way over the line. So you can reel that back. Like I say, a state model, I think, establishes best practice. Best practice gets emulated. Failure gets ignored.
Hello, Governor. My name is Hisham El-Maligi. I'm the co-founder of Muslims for Liberty. It's a national Muslim liberty organization, the first of its kind. Ron Paul brought me to the liberty movement, and of course, you said almost everything I agree with except one thing. I have a question about prisons, but before that, you mentioned you're Sharia phobic. Are you open for discussion about this? Because I don't think we have the same definition of what you mentioned. Would you be willing for a presentation?
Yeah, sure. But what I am against is that within Sharia law, women are not allowed the same rights or privileges that the U.S. Constitution guarantees. Gays are in that same category, so just for starters.
Before everybody claps, this is factually erroneous, and that's why I'm requesting a meeting where we can present something like
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
The prison issue is, you mentioned that you privatized the prisons and it was same service or same apples and oranges, but 2/3 of the cost.
Yes.
What do you see went wrong in other models of privatizing prisons around the country, and if you know something about New York?
You know, I can't. been fun, and thank you all very, very much. We'll go to this last question.
All right, so earlier in your speech where you were...
I'm sorry that I can't hear the person asking the question. So, I mean, for those that want to talk, and which is terrific, and then probably empty out the room, I just can't hear what's being asked.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right, so earlier in your speech...
One second,
where-
I didn't get my answer. The prison system, Governor, did you want to...
Well, prison system in New Mexico. When I took office, one of the biggest problems facing the state were there were 900 prisoners housed out of state. The state of New Mexico was being run by the federal courts under the Duran consent decree. So the federal courts were monitoring New Mexico. The New Mexico legislature refused to deal with the issue. So basically, I privatized half the state's prisons, and instead of $100 a day, it was $66 a day. And in this case, the federal courts abandoned the consent decree. And I have to tell you, they would not have abandoned the consent decree if we were not delivering the same goods and services. And I happen to think, and this is my own experience, there was never any lobbying. I never saw a whisper of any lobbying for stiffer sentencing. And I would like to point out that in California, in 2012, the biggest opposition to legalizing marijuana came from the public prison union. So, as governor of New Mexico, what I said in New Mexico, and I absolutely believe this, I said this in New Mexico, if we would adopt rational drug reform and actually be able to let people out of prison that are there on drug-related crime, not violent crime, that it would be a lot easier to empty the private prisons as opposed to the public prisons. And I think good government is providing same service, same goods, same services at a lower price. And in many instances, it's better services, better goods at a lower price. I can't hear you, sorry. Yo.
So earlier in your speech, you were talking about you had been mentioning that throughout your life you had had a lot of entrepreneurial experience here and there, and so I was wondering what your first experience as an entrepreneur was, and how that was, and what that was like.
So really, let's see, 10 years old, going out and for 40 cents I'll rake all the leaves in your yard. 50 cents I'll shovel snow. This was in South Dakota. Delivering newspapers, substitute newspaper delivery. I got $1.25 every time I did that. So those were my early entrepreneurial experience. I actually. Anyway, thank you.
Hello? I just wanted to thank you for speaking about Sharia law, and I find it outrageous that there's any sense of political correctness in terms of respecting Sharia law. It's one of the most direct assaults to our Constitution, and we need to start talking about it right now. And thank you.
And in that context, I just want to say or clarify, look, we're all for freedom of religion. All of us.
Of course.
Absolutely. It's the foundation of
But
this
this is
country.
a law that dictates behavior, and it's very fascistic. It's very strident, and it has nothing to do with liberty whatsoever. It's the farthest possible route, right? So thank you for speaking about it, and I pray that you will not be afraid. I hope they will not be afraid to talk about it. Also, one quick question. Is Jesse Ventura at all involved in your lawsuit? Because I know he's spoken extensively about the problem of the debate, the limitation of debate until it's gone home. But Jesse has promised to run with Howard Stern, if and when it
So apparently we have venue constraints. So again, thank you very much for having me.